Kyle Jones. We are here today to do our Sunday lecture. We usually do lectures on Thursdays and Sundays to educate ourselves out of what I talked to Mr. Brandon, an ostinato or a repetition of referring to our own tale, our own self. Interestingly enough, the idea of the hope and promise of a Messiah to come to the Jews, the ancient Jews, was that in the future time, a certain actuation or event would take place, that is the birth of their Savior, the Hebrew Savior, the Jewish Savior, as well as, of course, ours. So the ancient Jewish Hebrew tribe did look forward to in time as a line or something linear to the Christ. The other aspect that Dr. Thorleif Bowman discussed about time with the Jews is that it was also spatial, that the future required the past, and the present required the past and the future as one geometric shape. So we are to live out an ordained actuation, things coming into being until that fulfilled point. As opposed to the paganus, or the pagan's idea. It's a very amoral term. It means someone who was dwelling over there outside of our camp, meaning that we look at time as being cycles, a type of reincarnation or just a cycle, a repetition, the ostinato. And finally, I thought it was interesting that Dr. Tolkien in his work, The Silmarillion, discussed the Satan named Melkor, bad god, evil god, to be the deity that was full of velocity and amplitude, singing louder and louder outside of the infinite themes of God, where he pushed some of the Silmarils away, or the angels, if you will, the Ainur away, and some followed him into this repetitive ostinato, where God himself, or Iluvatar, the god of the waters, or God Father, to Tolkien's work, was giving out infinite themes. And if we only play our part that he has apportioned us, we can enjoy his infinite theme to sing praises to him and his song. These are infinite streams that go on in straight line. Now, with that said, I will begin this lecture discussing this idea of apportionment. Okay, this is an answer ultimately for the topic, the bigger topic that we're facing of the end of the world. Some people want to talk about the apostasy, the coming of our Messiah for a second time, and namely Revelation chapter 17's great harlot, the spirit of Antichrist that has corrupted us from the dawn of time. I'd like to say that this lecture that I did probably 12 years ago, which if you will, I was the nomothete, or I was the one who gave this term, logeia. Logeia is a Greek word that means the doctrines of reception, or someone who receives alms, someone who is in the receiving. Logos, and in the adverse, is the name for Christ, if you will. He is the ordained ology, the ordained science, the ordained ordering God who brings order into our life versus chaos. So you have logeia, which is a type of doctrine of reception. It is feminine in its gender. It's not feminine male bashing. It's just in its gender, it receives of the insemination of ideas. Where logos, the spermatikos logos, even mentioned by Marcus Aurelius, and the pagan's idea was that logos inseminates the world as male figure, and gives his sign to others that they would carry it on. So these are very big ideas, complex ideas, but these are ideas that we need to put on the table so that we can speak once again as our patriarchs, as our matriarchs, to what words meant and where we're at. I think that the problem that we have today is that we have no reference to what was said 2,000 years ago to make any sense of what is going to happen 2,000 years from that point, which is now. And I think part of our problem is not in that we don't have knowledge. We have a lot of knowledge. As Paul said, we have, in the last days, we'll have much information, such as information highways, internet, etc. That's not the point. The point is the wisdom to return to the genius of the origination words, to collect our minds and put them in an ordered system, which we would call genius. As the word genius means, to join, to also to originate out of nothingness something came, but that we would be in the genius, therefore ingenious. Now, two systems are going on. Dr. Alexander Hislop wrote a book called The Two Babylons, which does ultimately lead to Armageddon. It leads to, I think, a lot of the signs that we see today. But moreover and more intelligently, to talk about the last days on earth, is we need to. We can talk about, well, the world's going to end tomorrow or next 2 weeks, or we don't know what day or the hour, but it's going to happen really soon. Well, it's going to happen. If you study physics, we have what we call thermodynamics. It means we're all going to reach a point where the cool gets hotter and the hotter gets cooler, and then where everything's going to, there's not going to be any more reaction, and we're going to explode. And there's going to be like an atomic bomb in every atom in the wall and every atom in the ground. Everything's going to melt with a fervent heat. But this idea of logeia is what we're going to discuss today. And it's going to lead us to the idea of why we're discussing the end of the world. Logeia, in its form, its meaning is to receive. It is not a reality of itself. Logeia means I want to receive, to be filled, to be satisfied. I'm looking over here, I'm looking behind me, and I wrote this last time we did a lecture, and I want to get to this point, but I need to take my mind and track to this point. But if we could just for 1 second, we'll return to this. I want to show you this law of logeia, how that it governs our very mythologies in say, Greek mythology. And it wouldn't matter if it's Sumerian mythology, Akkadian, Babylonian mythology, Roman mythology. This logeia continues to pop her head up. And again, she, or logeia, is a law. It is a principle that governs literature itself, mythology itself. Though that I can't say there she is objectively, I can see her by her laws that govern literature, even Shakespeare's Macbeth, which is an extremely lengthy treatment on Macbeth. Look at these right here. These are called the Fates. The three Fates that were under Hecate. Hecate being the leading anti-god, if you will, the antichrist figure. Though in Greek mythology, Hecate was just a dark, brooding witch, a force, a dark shadow, if you will, that emanated a trinity of herself on earth. We have the anti-god or the anti-trinity found in all of the laws of literature when we discuss logeia. Again, logeia is the doctrine of receiving the allotments of life. Now, when we go to Greek mythology, under Hecate, we find three goddesses. One was called Clotho. She was the spinner, and you see pictures of her using a type of wheel, or what they call a shuttle, to warp and weave threads that were your life. You are the fabric of her. Clotho, and that's where you get the word cloth from. The other part of this unholy trinity we find in Greek mythology was the word lachesis. But by the way, her Latin name was Decima. I don't need to go into the Latin right now, but lachesis is where we get the word luck from. You ever talk about luck? Oh, I was just lucky. Well, the word comes from lachesis. Now, there's a Gaelic word called luc, and it means to be allotted. The etymology of lachesis or luck is this, that you have, and you have like an X factor. You don't know what X is, but you know what 2 is, and you know what the other 2 is, And you got to find out what X means. It's really simply put, the answer is there, but what does the answer fall to? Well, it falls there, and it's the number 4. That actually was the word lachesis, or luck. We have misrepresented the word luck to say that luck is some kind of governing invisible force that we can't define, such as, oh, he was just lucky that he got the prize today, or I was just lucky that I received this money. And you see the lottery, we win the lottery. Believe it or not, the word lot does come from the same word. It means, what are we allotted to? We're giving the credit to the goddess of luck. If you look at the word dice, it's the word deus. It's the feminine form of the word dea, or deity. It's the goddess of luck. So you say the word dice, it's the feminine goddess we're calling on. If you talk about sorcery, or sors, or sortilegia, it is the calling upon and the doctrine, the logeia of sors, the Latin god, the goddess of allotment. If you look at the Greek word for the 3 unholy trinity that we call them the morai, which means the ones who are apportioned. We also call them the apportioners. Now, I'm going to keep on here. So we have the spinner, the one who makes the cloth, the fabric of your life. We have lachesis, which means how is it lotted, the drawer of the lots. We have the measuring, the one who measures the size of the cloth. And then we finally have atropos, which means a mortality. Even in the Latin, we call her morta, which means death. And it just simply means without stopping, it unturning. You see her in pictures with the shears. She's the one who cuts the end of the line and cuts to your fate. Now, you've got the picture of that right there. You can see that, right? Can you get a good shot of that one? I want to back up here, now that we have that. By the way, the spinner was called the distaff as well, but the spinner, the wheel that Clotho used. So I hate to, and by the way, the 9-month pregnancy sheet, that's also part of her name. Whenever we get into the fertility goddesses, which we will, that's Clotho. But I want to discuss something here that brings reason. I hate to refer to a week-old lecture or even a few days old, because my mind is always working in some kind of line, and I want to be honest when I'm saying something in the light of my thought. So I do want to bring this thing up. Again, we are discussing Antichrist right now. We are discussing the spirit of Antichrist, of allotments that are taking place right now, to understand why we are heading things up and why we are ending things. And then one thing before I go back to this Fortunata, I'm going to call it the Morai. We actually get a Greek word called merimnao. Same word, merimnao. Get the word fortune. We get the word fate. We get the word fatality. We get the doctrine called fatalism, which leads us right back into, I want to put down Shakespeare's Macbeth that I did a treatment on. We'll discuss that a little bit about Shakespeare's Macbeth, which we'll discuss. And finally, I'm going to put this one, apportioners, over here. It's very important that we understand this word apportioner. This is going to be the key word right here, portion. Apportioners. I'm going to name her. I'm going to point her out who she is. We go to Revelation chapter 17. And John at Patmos, who is imprisoned, he's discussing the end of the world. He's in Revelation, he wrote as a Jew. He would state a few chapters, then he would go back in the next few chapters and explain what he said in fuller detail. Then he would go to the next few chapters and then make points, almost like a PowerPoint. Then he would go to the next few chapters and he would refer back to the first chapter, and then he would shoot forward. A good Jewish writer always writes something and takes a few chapters to write about something. The next few chapters, they always refer back to the previous chapter. So when you're reading Revelation, It's a panorama of time that once there's an idea that's settled, say like in chapters 5, 6, and 7, whatever you read that, he refers back again to say chapters 3, 4, And then you get to 7 and 8 and 9, he talks about the future. And then you get to the chapters after that, he refers back to the past again and into the future. So a Jew always spoke in reference to something of itself because it was the Word of God. The Jew understood that this is the Word of God and that past is the future, is the present. It's already done. God has ordained all things. There is nothing that can be taken from it, put to it. Revelation chapter 17, verses 4. Here's the woman. Here is the spirit of Antichrist. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones. And I'm just going to abbreviate. Verse 5. And upon her forehead was the name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Now, I'm going to go on. I'm going to go back for just a second. Just keep in mind the clothing of this woman. She was clothed in purple and scarlet. We mentioned this last week. I want to go back to the second book in the Bible. We're looking at roughly 1400, 1500 BC right here. I want to discuss the priest's clothing. I'm not going to take all the time in the world to read this whole chapter nor the following, but Exodus chapter 28. The priests, the intercessors between man and God, were a good thing at one time. But they were a picture, a sketch, an archetype of things to come, which is the Messiah. Once we had Messiah, there is no more need for a priest, an intercessor. We speak directly to God now. Christ is God. Jesus is God. We address him directly. And through him, he speaks to the Father. We are saved and atoned through him. But at one time in the Old Testament, a long time ago, the picture and the shadow and the type had not been fulfilled to the full ayah in the Hebrew. It was a different picture of strength, a different picture of intercessorship until the greater intercessorship would come. Until the greater strength would come, we had the priests. So the making of the priest's clothes were purple and scarlet, we see in verse 5. They were decked with gold and blue and purple and scarlet. We see in verse 8, purple and scarlet. We continue to see purple and scarlet in verse 15. We see in verse 33, I'm passing up a lot, they were decked and arrayed in purple and scarlet. And upon their head was, on the signet of the mitre that they would wear, was a statement. It said, holiness to the Lord. Okay? Upon their head said holiness to the Lord. So you go back into the future. Once again, I want to say this one more time. In Revelation chapter 17, this is the future now. What is this system going to be looking like? It's decked in purple and scarlet. And upon her head says, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So we have a contrast. Same type of system, but no longer needed. Once that old system has been fulfilled, it is no longer necessary. And if we drag it back up at its dead carcass, we have a dead carcass in our hands. Now, what's really scary is this. Let me go here to where she is located. Now we have a location. She has been moving through the dawn of time and into the future, the spirit of her, but her as a spirit. She is one part of the Trinity of Antichrist. But her spirit resides someplace in the location. And it said, here is in Revelation chapter 17, verse 9. And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads that she sits upon are the 7 mountains on which she resides or sits. Now, everybody knows the land of the 7 hills. If you study history, if you study Ever Given, if you study any kind of archaic history, you know that the land of the 7 hills, well, that is Rome. That's the Vatican. And is it not true that that is the epicenter for having a priest, an intermediarship? do they not promote that you go to a man to get to God? Do they not promote that the Pope says, I have the keys to heaven? Because he has, through history and heritage, inherited the keys of Peter. When Jesus said, Peter, upon you I will build my church, he was not talking about that I'm going to give you the keys to heaven so you can give it to who objectively you want to and they'll be saved. It was not that way. Jesus said, upon you, Peter, I build my church. Now, Dr. Graham Twelvetree, and more importantly right now, Dr. William Bauckham, a leading scholar at Edinburgh, has written a book on the history of the Petrine or the Peter, the sources. The first gospel that we call the academics or whatever they call Quell, they call it Q. The first source that Mark himself read, talked to Peter with, asked Peter where he was coming from, and then Mark wrote down and understanding Peter's relationship with Jesus as well as Mark's relationship with Jesus. The first source ever written down was Peter's writings about his friendship with Christ. They call that Quell source. It was never accepted into the canon by Athanasius around about 250 AD. The canon means the accepted rule of the Bible. Simply put, it was more erratic. It was an earlier writing of a fisherman that wrote things in kind of a jagged edge form. It was Mark who was more academic that was allowed to put down the words in an orderly fashion in his testimony. But Peter was given his epistles, so that's given. But Jesus said, upon you I will build my church. Well, the church is based on the four Gospels. Okay? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, were synoptic, and John was, again, an account of John the Beloved's friendship with Jesus. But the basis, the cornerstone, the root of these Gospels was the Petrine or the Peter source. It was called Q, call it Quell. So there's some academic information, but therefore, Jesus was right. Once again, of course, upon the church, I build off of you, Peter. And now we know. That's that. The epistles that came later were simply the writings of the apostles that had gone into the world and carried with them four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they were writing about their experience using the Gospels and then writing the epistles. So either their secretary or amanuensis or themselves wrote the epistles as to what Paul had to say, what Peter later had to say, what James had to say, but nonetheless, the Gospels were the cornerstone, and the cornerstone of the Gospels was the Petrine source called Quell. Well, therefore, the Pope has nothing to do, who came 325 years later and created, under Constantine, or was created by Constantine, an ordered system, which they called the gathering of the councils of Nicaea, or Nicaea, depending upon how you want to say it. And they joined paganism to Christian names. If you go to Rome today, you'll see all of the Greek and Roman gods, but they renamed them by Christian and patriarchal names such as Moses or Isaiah, whatever. But it's a pagan system, both in icon or idol form, and it's a pagan system in the sense of intercessorship, that we have to go to a man and they give us a blessing. We do not pray to Mary. We do not dare pray to Mary to have intercessorship between us and Jesus, or that she could persuade Jesus. It's said and done. So, again, here is the mind who has wisdom, that she sits on the land of the seven hills. This is the future place where Antichrist will come out of. Now, I'm not going to discuss Daniel's peace covenant with concerning, I believe, the Pope and Obama coming over this next month, and I'm not going to just got a text here. I'm sorry about that. I'm not going to discuss the things that are taking place right now because this is for a more orderly fashion. But I just want to establish that the system of the old world, what I call Logaea, has culminated and ended up in the Roman Catholic Church. So what I'm going to do now is cover a few terms here to substantiate who she is and what she is doing and why we are discussing Daniel's 70 weeks. Okay, now I want to discuss a little bit about this morai. The morai, merimnao might be the better word to use. It means the apportionment. Okay, it means the Greek goddesses, the unholy trinity I call. What are they willing to give us? This is Greek. These are the Greek. This is the Greek term. The apportionment. What am I allotted today? Again, I say to you, we as Christians are to take on our master's form by speaking truth and inseminating the world versus sitting back and waiting to be given an allotment or to be thinking about luckiness, like what is going to be given to me. We have got to take the doctrines of Logos and penetrate this world. Morai, merimnao, means apportionment. But the Greek goddess's name came out of that word to apportion, and they were called the morai. The Romans were called the Fortunatas or the Fortunas. I could even put fortune, but if you look at the word fortuna, it's the same word. It means fortune. Okay? And they came out of the same Greek system, and they simply embellished upon the Greek system and probably earlier systems such as Persian and Babylonian ideas of what a fate or a fae or a fortunatu was. They dispensed your fate, just like the three goddesses, the Clotho, Strepho, and Lachesis. They dispensed the fates to you, and that's where you get the word fatality from, or fatal. There's another term that I'll use. It's called the aleatorical clause, and I will probably destroy the spelling. Aleatorical. It's a legal term, and it means it means more than what I'm going to say, but this covers the basis of the legal idea that whatever you do affects me, and whatever I do affects him, and whatever we do, we're in the affecting nature because we are being affected to the effect by the prima causa. But aleatorical clause means what is happening in this world, in this machination, this machine that we are living in. What is the new thing? What is going on? Let's observe all the things that are happening in this gear work. Aleatorical clause just means that if you do something legally, it'll affect him and me and you. So we're all combined. The fates designated the aleatorical clause, or that which is aleatorical. They designated what you would receive in terms of doctrines of reception, or luck, or fate, fortune, however you want to put it. And it was them in mythologies that were given the rank of the givers of fate. The Middle East has it as the genie. Remember that? You have 3 wishes. Again, the number 3 pops up. We can't get away. There's a rule that is given by God that governs even pagan writings themselves. There's nothing outside of the hand of God. Whatever God is, he has ordained even evil itself, or something that has fallen far away from what is the doctrines of Christ, to preach the doctrines of Christ. I want to get into fatalism. We discussed that. I will discuss Shakespeare's Macbeth later, but remember the 3 witches? I don't know if you ever read Macbeth. There were 3 witches that came together. They were in the form, and though Shakespeare didn't say it, of Clotho, Strepho, and Lachesis. They were the 3 goddesses. The Germans called them the Norns. They were the 3 goddesses that decided the fate of mankind. They worked under Odin. But Shakespeare wrote of 3 witches in his Macbeth that came together upon the heath. That's where you get the word heathen from. Upon the dry beds or desert out there, the place over there. Hathen Row, the Anglo-Saxon, means you people that are living over there in that dry, desolated area. We say heathen to mean something very moralistic, that you are a very immoral person. But heathen is a very amoral. It's without moralism to it. It just says that you are a person living in the dryness of life. There's no fruitfulness to your nature, but nonetheless, that's where you live. I'm not going to judge you. Look at the word pagan. Paganus in the Latin. It means a country dweller. It has no moral term. We have done a disservice in our country by moralizing terms. Though the good intention is there, being a Christian nation, we have moralized terms that did not to be moralized, that did not need to be moralized. They needed to be technical. If you look at the word village, villain. We say villain's a bad word. Well, villanus, was a person living in the village. If you talk about infantry, that's where you get the word infant. It means someone who's low on the rung of the social ladder. Pedestrian, pedant, podos, it means the little footers. That's where you get the pediatrics from. The very young ones. If you get the word federal government, father government. Metropolis, mater, mother city, metropolis. If you get the word economy, oikos in Latin, it means the house. Nomos, the law. How do you handle your house? It never meant money until recently. Really, I was reading about something. Money didn't mean what economy, the study of economics did not mean in total sum to the distribution of monies and funds. It was earlier put by 150 years ago, a study of how a government was run or a house was run. But oikos nomos means economy, which means how do you run your house? And the pagan's hope was called loth and dome. How will I live my life? Loth. And I will govern my dome, my domicile. Domesticity, to domesticate. And by my name as head of the house, I marry and I give birth through my wife to a child who goes out and gives my name to the villains, to the villanus, to the pagans, to the heathens. And this is how we run the economy. So all these terms, and he was the federal government, and she was the metropolis, the mother city. Well, the mother city here is Babylon in spirit, and it is the physical mother city, Rome. So this system is so accurate when we just start looking at the words and seeing what has ordered everything that we say, breathe, and think. It came from the divine orderer. God himself, the one who distributes the true morai, the one who truly apportions. Now, this is what I want to get at today, and Brandon and I were talking about this yesterday, about apportionment. And it sounds so crazy to think that I'm leading to the end of the world, the study of it, or Daniel's 70 weeks, but if we don't know intelligently what's going on behind the scenes, we can't speak intelligently about the things of the future. Apportionment. Now, we'll discuss Grimm's Law later, but this is very important to understand this, the word apportionment. I believe I spelled that right. Apportion. There is, in Grimm's Law, if you want to break down a word, you have to find certain sounds. This happens to be a labial. And I could just simply put down here and just bring it to the Greek word apo. I'm gonna write it in Greek, and then I'll think it's apo like that. But I'll put it in English. Apo. It's where you get the word off, or you could even say the word of. But this means off of something or of something. Apo. So I can take this out. This is a suffix, suffixual. We don't need that. It's English. It did come ultimately from the Greek. We now have this right here, the key word R and T, what I call the square root. Now, that's probably a better way to say it, but it's the square root of the word apportion. Off means of or off. From, rata. Keep in mind the fates, the goddesses, the false trinity. They were called the apportioners. Ratio, and I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to rewrite this again, make it where I can see it. You guys can see it. Apo in the Greek means of or off. Ratia is the root word. It's where we get the word ratio, ration, reason. Now, I know you're thinking I'm making this stuff up, some of you out there and watching. If you go to Dr. Tom Shipley's work, Joseph Shipley, the study of the origin of the Indo-European languages, you're going to find this. If you go to the Oxford Etymological Dictionary, you'll find this. If you go to, I'm trying to think, Dr. Jacob Grimm's Teutonic Mythology, the greatest treatment ever on the decoding of our language, you're going to find this. I've got, as you know, my friends here can say, probably about 7,000 books in this house. Not just in this room, not in that room, but up in the house. And when I say something, I'm referring to so many references that are in agreement that I can't just say that one book says it. Though I can say a big portion, like we were looking at the word nice. We looked at the word that the origin of the word nice means to be ignorant. We looked at the nescer, the Latin root, nescer in the French, Old French. This means to be as a baby, ignorant, but will grow up one day and no longer be nescer or natal, where we get the word, just nascent. But anyway, from or off the reason or the ration that we're given. Now, if God is the apportioner and He allots every one of us a certain gift, a certain talent, a certain ratio or ration, here He is. Here's all of us. Lisa, you're given that. Brandon, you're given that one. I'm trying to make it even. I'm given this. I'll give a smaller one. I'm given a smaller one, but I'm given something here. Sam and all of it. We're all given some kind of allotment within the bigger pie. And when we look at the word apportionment or apparatio, we have to understand as God created all of us, I can speak and reason and function with my talents honestly within this confine. And Lisa, you can do the same in these confines. And you're good at what you do and I'm good at what I do. And then Brandon comes in and he does, that's a different color, and he does this. And Quinn does this and his fiancée Samantha does this and so on. And so we have our gifts that we have received by God in the creation of who we are, and we can walk around our confines of our honest apportionment. But isn't it interesting when you look at the root word apportionment, apportion, it does mean creation, it means sovereignty, it means pre-planned, it means dispensing gifts, and it means once we understand that, we can operate cleanly, honestly, with a good soul about it, that God has given us our very reason, our very our ratio, like the ratio, like so 100 to 20 to 100, or 2 to 100, whatever in ratio. We are given 1% into 100 ratio. That's our percentage, our ratio. I love when we get into the words, they give it away. I believe that if you study even the English language and you go back to its root, you're going to find God's theology. That's what I'm really getting at. I'm getting at that God is so sovereign that no matter what you study, you're going to find the same system of order, whether it's in science or languages. I just happen to have fun doing languages and music. So I think that's interesting. So the Fortuna, the Morai, the genies, always who operated in the unholy view of three, the Trinity, they claim to have this apportionment. They claim to be the ones who apportioned us our allotments. Well, when we go back into 2 Kings, and I was looking at this passage, I can't have it in front of me. Reading, just honestly, just read this, read the book of 2 Kings. When we go into 2 Kings, we find Israel falling because they had syncretized I'm going to put their belief system with God as being, or not even equal to, the Asherahs. Now, you would know her by her name. You would know her by what she was worshipped as in the groves. The Jews worshipped Asherah, not thinking that it was separate from God. That they believed that Asherah was like a part of God. They had syncretized. They had put in sync or in union the study of God, the belief in God, with the goddess of the groves. Now, I'll make it short and then I'll make it long. This is why we're going to our judgment. Because the Jews started listening more to the doctrines of Asherah. She was the Hebrew goddess that is the equal system of the unholy trinity of the Morai, the Norns, and the Fortunatas, or the Fates. I could go into the Fates, or the Fays, the Fairies as well. The Furies, the Fires, the Beltane fires are all the same word. Pharaoh also comes out of that word. Farah, fire. Pures, Pharisees, the apportioners, the one who allotted themselves a section, and they were pure because of fire. They were refined. All this is the same word. Even the word Bel comes from the same word. Bra, Fra. If you know Grimm's Law, we'll discuss Grimm's Law, same word. Nonetheless, the ancient Israelites worshipped the apportioner goddess that they didn't think was in contradistinction with God male. So I want to go over real quickly to what they were exactly doing. I'm going to go to Jeremiah chapter 10. And the reason why the Jews were looking to her is because that she did not teach a doctrine of suffering. She taught a doctrine of receiving. That you would receive if you were in her system. That your crops would grow. Though that God said, male God said that your crops would grow. Though the male God said your crops would grow if you let the ground go fallow or did not till it and plant it on the seventh year, I say you should just believe in me. The system says that. The system, and that you can continue to till the ground. And it was all based on fear. It was all based on economics. Mankind, womankind was already getting in debt. They were already running their businesses in fear. And they thought, if I just do this one more little business transaction, I can pay off the rest of my debts. I don't need to listen to God just this exact moment. Let me just get that extra little bit of money so I can pay this person off and this person off. That's what they got into. That's what we get into. So here she is, the apportioner. This is what she looked like. If I can find it. Hold on. Jeremiah. Let me see here a second. That's it. Hold on. Don't hate me. Trying to find it. Jeremiah. Give me a second. Was it Jeremiah 7? Forgive me on this one. Okay, here you go. It was Jeremiah 10. Okay, good. I just didn't see it. I'm losing my sight. Okay, Jeremiah the prophet, who was speaking to Israel roughly in 608. Excuse me, this was Judah. Speaking to Judah in 608. Israel had already been taken captive and spread across the world by the Assyrians because they were doing the same thing. This is Judah returning to the same vomit that northern Israel did. And Jeremiah says, this is what you're doing. All right? For the customs of the people, and by the way, that in the Septuagint, I believe that's the word ethnos, where we get the word heathen from. Those dried up people who do not cultivate on good ground. All of these customs are vain. For one will cut an evergreen tree out of the forest, the work of the hands, the work of the workmen with the axe, and then they'll put it in their house, and then they will deck it with gold and silver. They will fasten it upright with hammers, and it goes on. And I can tell you that the custom of this evergreen tree brought out of the house brought out of the outside into the house was done on December 25th. That was the day that the sun god back in that day did not show its light. Actually, the 23rd, 24th, the earth eclipsed the sun, and the sun would not show itself on the equatorial line for a couple of days. They would pray to the sun god and to the vegetation goddess, the Hebrew Morai, Fortunata, and they would offer human sacrifice. They would offer sacrifices such as just anything, presents, and they would put the presents under the tree. She also had something that you don't see in here. He didn't cover it because he didn't need to. But if you study the Asherah, you'll see her as in the shape of a cone. Have you ever gone to like any bookstores like say Davis Kid or Barnes & Nobles? You ever see on Christmas time the cones, like a Christmas cone? Well, they shave the evergreen down. The evergreen already is in that type of a shape, but they shave it to a cone. They deck it with the orbs, the balls, because they are a sign of the fertility goddess, the goddess of many breasts that feeds the nations. So that was the other part of her symbol, was the orb. So on December 25th, let me think about it, they make a tree out of the ground, they put it into the house, they deck it with all the gold and silver, with the orbs on it. Oh, by the way, she was also the goddess of vegetation that was in semblance to the astrological signs, and they put a star on her head. And I have a picture of Inanna, who was decked with the stars upon her head. What does that sound like? I just want anybody. Sorry, does it sound like anything? Anybody knows what that might be that we're doing today? It's a system. It's a system that I love. One of my old friends who said to me, "If you didn't do the tree, if you didn't do the presents, if you didn't spend excessively and you ate excessively and drank excessively on December 25th, how would you do your Christmas anyway?" Sorry, and I'm not slamming on the people who do it. I love my wife. I love my family. Everybody is doing it. I'm trying to just simply come in and speak reason to my God, who has given me reason and apportionment to know the difference between what is paganism and its origin and what is not. Because Jeremiah said something that's very interesting. He didn't say that it was a god that was living or a goddess that was living. He didn't say the custom was something that had substance that could actually send you to hell. What he said was that the customs of these things are in vain. It means they don't bring forth fruit. They don't bring forth something that you can be healthy with the next week or the next 2 weeks from that. You come back bedraggled, tired, and you kind of wish you still had it, and it is left on the side of the tree is left on the side of the road like it's just been. I have friends who say analogies that I won't say, but it's like a dirty old cheap, prostitute. That's what he said. They thrown on the street. What do you do with it? I mean, it's not that I laugh at that for people who've done it all their life, and I have done it. I've loved Christmases all my life. But just the idea. But what does Christ's Mass mean too? It's the same system that came out of Babylon. It's the Mass of Christ. Whenever the Solus Invicti, in the Latin, the sun, the God of the Sun, the Sun God, which they, of course, the Catholics call the Christ figure, is a wafer. Guess what the wafer is? It's a picture of the sun. And the Kohana Baal, or the cannibal, the Kohan Baal, Kohen, meant the priest. That's the Hebrew word for priest. Baal, or Baal, just depends on how you want to spell it. Doesn't matter, because it's all transliterated, was the sun god. And you always saw the sun god seen as a disc. And there's your wafer shaped as a disc. Have you ever heard this word Kohan Baal? What do you think what word might come from that? Anybody know? It's called cannibal. Cannibalism. You've heard of cannibalism, haven't you? Well, cannibalism. The priests who ate the full meal, who were the mouths for the deity, the god. Kohan, priests of Baal, the sun god. The priests of Moloch were called cannibals. guess what they did that Israel became syncretized to in this doctrine of reception, because if they did it, their crops would be given to them and they could pay off more debt because they weren't practicing the Sabbath or the Shemitah that we'll talk about in the future. We continued to act in fear, thinking if we could only do this and that, we could make an extra buck. And we think we're entitled to cheat our brother or sister and not even almost live a vow of poverty in the sense that we're going to say the truth no matter what. But a cannibal, a Kohan Baal, usually in the old world, and we'll discuss the in more detail this system. I won't go too far because it's very graphic. But we have the priests. The priests who would sit around, they were around the pharmakeia. There was a pharmakeia, an initiate. It was a virgin usually. She lay there and she was drugged. The pharmakeia means to be given pharmaceuticals. She was drugged out of her mind. She was a virgin. This was called what we would say, you ever heard the word agape? Agape love? That was the agape love table initially. Jesus Christianized this term. The agape table was where they put the priest, the girl that was to be eaten, and she was to be killed and raped. They inseminated her, ate her, killed her, destroyed her. They were considered the mouths of God. The Pharisees in Babylon said that we are the kingdom of God because we are the mouth of God. And where we speak for God, there God is. Jesus said, where you are, if you are gathered in my name and speak for me, then there I am. But the Kohan Baals were the pagan mouths of God, and they would eat the consumption sacrifice for the sun god, Baal. That table was called the agape table. Now, when Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? He asked the word philia, do you love me? Do you have philos for me? Do you have brotherly affection? Peter said yes. He asked again, do you have brotherly affection for me? He said yes. Jesus asked a third time, do you agape me? And Peter went away screaming, crying. Why did he do that? Because Peter somehow knew there was a heritage to that word that meant, are you ready to be consumed, killed, slaughtered for the Father's sake? Which he was, in a horrible condition, horrible fashion. He was called sawn asunder. But anyway, Peter knew somehow the heritage of that word. So when Jesus spoke, he used words from a pagan conditioned world and brought them into the fullness of meaning, where now we are consumed spiritually by the God as a sacrifice. That means we might have to go poor. We might have to be beaten or slaughtered. We have to take it. And that was what Peter could not handle. And neither can we. When I'm speaking this stuff, don't think I can handle anything either unless God gives me the strength. Well, nobody's strong here unless God gives it to us. But I'm just saying, and that means Christmas too, all that stuff. I still have a hard time with it. I get caught up in it. And I'll be talking to somebody, I say, yeah, Merry Christmas to you. And I go, what did I just say? I start thinking about, but it's okay. That's okay too. But what's not okay is to not try within the reason that God has given you for now. We're not supposed to jump out of our suits and become somebody else. I'm not saying that. We're waiting on God, and God is giving us the strength. But we should do according to our ratio, our ration, that God has compelled us to do. And therefore, I'll have a conversation and I'll discuss these kind of things. But I find it interesting. The force of the word agape love came from a horrendous act that back far enough in time, that's what it meant. And we don't have that kind of force today. I think it's funny when people say curse words, they try to have force and make it, they either try to be funny or effective in aggression. But I could break down, I remember talking to you one day about every curse word there was and breaking it down into its French origin. In terms of the archers, there's two ideas behind even the F word. You talk about, you can no longer shoot your pluck your bow at me, English archermen, by the French and the Norman invasions. He said, "Je ne pluck toi." I think it was just you can't pluck your arrow at me. And they would and the French would practice guerrilla warfare by taking someone out of the English camp, gagging them, binding them, cutting their middle finger off, and then throwing them back into a foxhole, running back to their hill and doing that. It means you can't pull your bow back anymore. So I'm just saying there's an origin too, and the other one is the Congress under the king and under Henry. So these are terms that we could take the force away from if we know the history. But if we know the history of agape, you can't take the force away from that. That's a violent, forceful act. And to be talking to Christ and him to use these words, can you imagine the force it must have had upon Peter? We don't have that kind of force anymore because we don't know the meaning of these words. So I'm looking at Brandon as though the time is getting near. Is that correct? Or you were looking at me? Okay. So I'm going to just wrap it up. I did not, again, pre-plan this lecture and started talking. We're getting better. Hopefully we'll get better at this stuff. But just to say something, we need to know at least one aspect from the dawn of time where actually from Eden, I didn't get a chance to go into the fall of Eden, as they were cast out of Eden, starting right here, from the fall, all the way to the end of the world. That's it. It's the teleos, the study of teleology. It means to telegraph, to telephone, to the end of it all. And so there is a system of God that does work in this world, and there is a system of Antichrist that works in this world, if I can just keep this going. And all are governed by God. There's nothing that's not under the system, or if you will, the story, the organized pattern of God. Nothing is out of that. We can call it Olam, heaven. We can call that Shem, which is God's law, his order. We can call it, even by a better term, I love the word dabar. It's a Hebrew word, and it means the organized thing. There's actually also a stone that the ancient Hebrews would dance around in ancient dances, and they were dancing as to show the organized pattern of the planets dancing around the sun, if you will, or the organized thing. But that's where we get the word Deborah from. It means judge, and it means bee. And if you look at a bee, they have some 5,000 some dances. They come back to the hive to tell the bees where that other location of flower beds are. Who gave them that kind of intelligence? So I think it's once again, a brilliant word, Dabra, or Deborah, to use. I think it's a beautiful word. But nonetheless, the beauty of studying idolatry is that we can understand it better from the context of knowing what is good. And we can create a thatched system that one confirms the other one, and we can see God's motion as he's ending up things by the system of this woman, or the Logeia system, and how she works and her mechanism that God has ordained with God to the very end of time. Okay, I think I'll just wrap it up for there. So this is Kyle Jones. Again, we had a good day today, I hope. Hope you're not falling asleep or have lost your minds or jumped out the window, whatever. But anyway, thank you very much. We'll keep on. Thanks. Bye.